From your experience, do you think war is a part of our nature, or is it something that civilization creates? You only have rights that you can defend. Can you please elaborate on that? Do you think there is any possibility that something good will come out of it from the super intelligence being born because it has one of the God's trait?
I just don't know. I don't usually put myself in a situation where I convince myself that I know what's going to happen. I just think people are inherently flawed.
What brought the Roman era down, and Joe just mentioned it, right? It's the people.
Do you think that there is any chance someday humans will be able to live like a utopia of sorts?
But as long as there is a disproportionate distribution of wealth and resources and ideology, you will have war.
I like your background. You got all your paraphernalia up and everything.
Yeah, that's the I Love Me wall back there. A couple brigade this and stars of that and such. But
excellent.
I've actually been considering, I see you've got your challenge coin collection back there, which is awesome.
Yeah, I kind of pulled it out, a few months back, and I said, well, let me see what I got. And, I didn't realize I had so many of them. So I figured, it's a shame, and I'll put them up, And then since I started doing the podcast, it kind of fell in line with Veterans Corner.
In your background, there are guns also, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got one of the rifles there, and I've got a shotgun in the case.
We actually, like when we were planning for Veterans Corner, those were the things that we were actually talking about, the things that we are going to keep in the back. And guns was like, I was like, yeah, put guns right there on the top.
But since I like them, I figure I'll leave them there.
Yeah.
Well, I have some swords. Well, I have 2 sabers and a.
So you were an officer then.
That is so interesting.
Swords. Yeah. You use swords.
That's right. They chop the heads off of the people running from front lines. Right. Did you know that? That's why officers have swords.
Wow, really?
Cavalry. Yeah. The field grade officers were called field grades because they would stand in the field behind the assembled army, and anyone who turned around and ran got killed by the field grade officers.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And is it still true? And or what is the reason?
It is not still true. I think mutiny is still on the books.
Okay.
Cowardice, I think, is still on the books. Falling asleep and dereliction of duty is still on the books, but they don't carry that. It's not that draconian. No one's getting heads chopped off anymore.
Yeah.
Nowadays,
but the punishment was pretty strong.
If you run away.
Yeah.
Well, it's an all-volunteer army. It's just completely different. It's a professional volunteer army, professional non-commissioned officer corps, excellent training. Right. It's just not quite the same. And, now it's a remote control army with drones and pretty soon the tanks are going to be drone tanks, ground combats, drones.
Yeah, sorry I look scruffy, but, Anchorage talked me into letting my beard grow out.
That is actually looking really, really good, by the way, George. I'm telling you, that is looking good.
It'll get there. This is just the 4th day, so 5th day or something. Yeah. But it'll get there.
Yeah, that'll look...
This is a week of growth for me.
A week? Oh, my goodness. Yeah. The funny thing is that my head is not totally gray yet, but my beard comes out like 70% gray, so I don't get it. I don't know how the...
That is a salt and pepper look. That is in trend. Yeah, it's in the trend. It's looking...
You're the fashion guy.
Yeah, check out some magazines, man. It's all...
I don't need magazines anymore. I don't have time.
Hey, this might be a dumb question, but when does the podcast start?
It has already started. It was recording already. I've already gotten 3 or 4 reels by now. And the conversation, but I got good content. All right. So let's get started. So the title of the video, as you guys know, is What War Reveals About Human Nature. 2 US veterans discussing Utopia, and we have two veterans here. First, I'd like to introduce George. George is the creator of Veterans Corner. He's a former. I believe you've given 25 years of your life, right, George?
Yeah, I spent 8 years in the Air Force and 17 years in the Army.
Awesome.
Special operations in the Army, and in the Air Force, I worked on ICBMs, which are nuclear missiles.
And we really don't have to be humble here. Let's brag about what you've done so that I get the,
Well,
all right. And then we have Joe also here. I have actually read a little bit about you on your LinkedIn. That was very interesting, by the way.
LinkedIn. They never check LinkedIn.
So, but it was very, very interesting. Actually, I was like super impressed. As a veteran, you've been a captain. You have actually launched a lot of companies. You have been advisor in many, many, many companies. And you've even worked in Meta after your service. After your service, I'm like super intrigued to know a little bit like about you, what has been your background, how did you get into the army, anything.
Okay. Happy to fill you in. And yeah, I worked at Meta for a short time, but I worked at Google for a long time just prior to that. And I feel like, I know we'll get to the point where we talk about becoming a veteran and getting out of the military, but I had 4 years at a biotech company called Genentech, and that was a very transformational time for me. That was an eye-opening, wow, because I went into the Army, 4 days after I graduated from high school. I was 18. Yeah. And so I spent 4 years at West Point, and then I graduated and I spent 8 years on active duty in the armor/cavalry branches, and a lot of jobs at that time different. They move you around in the military quite a bit. Tank platoon leader, 10 company executive officer, recon platoon leader for brigade recon troop. A couple of staff jobs, lots of schooling, and then 2 company commands in the First Cavalry Division, which was, the honor pinnacle point of my career.
Okay, that's amazing.
Interesting. It's funny. I've my last 3 guests on the podcast were all West Pointers. I didn't plan it that way.
We're everywhere.
Yeah.
What's interesting is when you graduate, you get a number called a column number, and mine's classified, but it's in the 54,000s, 54 something.
Wow. Okay.
Which means I'm the 54,000th blank, blank, blank graduate. And, the academy was founded in 1802, graduated in 1998. So all of those years,
only
there had only been 54,000 graduates.
Wow.
Well, it's only the very select
okay.
people go to that. It's it's a select school that's why it's called West
So
Point.
there are levels for army school also, apparently.
Well, there's, I think, just 3 ways to get commissioned. I wouldn't rank order them, but there's officer candidate school where you transition from a non-commissioned officer to an officer. There's ROTC, which is Reserve Officer Training Corps, and then there's a U.S. Military Academy. Reserve Officer Training Corps, you would go to a civilian college or university. West Point is the U.S. Military Academy is entirely owned, controlled, and run by the Army.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very enlightening day for me.
Speaking of military academies, I think Trump went to a military academy too.
But we went to the same grad school.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not at the same time.
Right.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
And very interesting. Very interesting.
All right.
Yeah.
So we've got thank you for introducing yourselves. Let's get dirty now with the topic. Like, what do you think of war before you got enlisted? George, let's start with you. What did you think of war before you went to the war? And what happened afterwards? How did your mindset change?
That's a long story because I'm 60 years old, so we'd have to go way back. But when I was growing up, I was born in '65. We had Vietnam and all these things were just coming through all of that, and then all the war movies were out. From World War II and World War I and World War II movies were out, and then the Vietnam movies started to come out. So it was a time in my youth where I was not bombarded, but I was kind of influenced highly through movies. Apart from that, my uncles were all in the Army or the Navy. Actually, about 10 members of my family have been in the military.
Okay. So you were pretty accustomed to the idea of military, but what was
So it kind of like, it kind of like was a patriotic thing to do, right? I was patriotic. It wasn't, the thing that, oh my God, I have to go to the Army, right? Or the Air Force.
Right.
And I had gotten married and I figured, hey, and I took the Air Force, I took the ASVAB, and they said, hey, George, you scored high enough that you can get any job you want in the Air Force. So it was either between avionics, which is working on aircraft, the cockpits of aircraft. I think I had to wait like 6 months for that to get in, or missile maintenance, which was only a 3-month wait. So I said, you know what, I'll just go the missile maintenance route, and that turned out to be very very interesting, because you're part of a 5-man team, and the whole premise of that is so these missiles are out there in the northwest, and the job was to go and install these into the silos. And sometimes these missiles have components that go bad or have to be replaced, and you have to go in there. It's all hush hush, very secret codes, and getting into the silos. So it was interesting on that in that. But after a while, you learn to say, wow, this is I'm working on these things, and these are like ICBMs are in that time, the Cold War, right? Where we talked about the Cold War, Russia and the United States, the whole nuclear arsenals and all these things, what they say, the N word, right? But, it was an interesting experience for me. Living in the Northwest South Dakota, it got really cold in the wintertime. Snow drifts, 6 feet. You'd try to walk out your door sometimes and you couldn't get out. You'd have to dig yourself out. So very interesting living in the Black
Amazing.
Hills, South Dakota.
So it was a patriotic thing.
Yeah. So bring me back. So what was the other part of the question? I mean,
Yeah, it was like, what was your thoughts about
war, right?
war before getting
Yeah.
enlisted
So
and after getting enlisted, after
being
leaving the
young
boss?
again, I guess I started with the whole movies and everything. But my dad at the time joined the United Nations, of all things, right? So my dad started working for the UN, and he worked for the UN for 25 years. And it was kind of like being a military brat. So we ended up going at a very young age. We left New York City, and I ended up in Israel. And I went to school. My grade school was in Israel. At the time, this was just a few years in 1973. 74, they had just had the 1973 war in Israel, and so I grew up around that whole environment, right? Being in the United Nations, or a United Nations brat, I should say. I was intermixed with a lot of consulate and embassy kids whose parents were there as well, so I grew up in that environment. But it was just, it's hard to say. So what do I think about war? So I think war is something that has been around for thousands of years, right? I mean, we go back into biblical times. I believe that war has just existed, right? And to me personally, I think war has come about because of a clash between two spiritual forces, right? We always have the good and the evil. And I want to get too metaphysical.
I'm so sorry, Judge. I'm so sorry. I'm interrupting. The question is, before you enlisted, before you joined the army, what did you think of war? Like about war? Like, what did you think about it? What were your opinions at that time? Or did you have any opinions, like, what do you think about, like, if you got into a war, what would be the feeling? Things like that. So, and after experiencing it,
thought of it that way. To me, war was just something that was ongoing. It's always been around. It's always been here, and so I accepted it. My father was in the UN, like I said, and the UN was supposed to be the peacemakers, right? So I was always in a country that was between two opposing factions, right? The Arabs against the Jews, or when we lived in Cyprus, it was the Turks and the Greeks.
So you actually grew up in a generation which knew war very, very deeply.
It was this intricate part of history. It was ongoing.
Right.
It was ongoing. Yeah. So I just grew up with it and I accepted it. I never really thought about it.
It's a very different perspective. If you grow up with something like that, okay, that is so amazing. My generation would never understand that. My generation would never even understand that. That is a very different outlook to look at the word God.
Right.
Joe, hey, what do you think about, like, before you enlisted, what did you think war was? And, after experiencing it, how different was the reality?
Yeah, I grew up watching. Well, I had my father was in the army a long time ago. All of his brothers, so all my uncles. I wouldn't say it was and then I had siblings who were in government service. My brother was an army officer, my older brother. So it wasn't something that was odd for us. In fact, it was a bit revered. People were very, when my brother came home on leave, everybody wanted to talk to my brother when he came home on leave. It was a huge deal. And so I had a glorified view of the military at that time. I grew up watching G.I. Joe on television. Nobody died. I grew up watching the A-Team. Nobody gets hurt on the A-Team either.
Yeah.
Despite the carnage for their vehicles. They see these AK-47s everywhere. No one gets hurt.
Right.
And then I watched the Gulf War on CNN, like everyone else. Not everyone else, but maybe not George. But I certainly.
Yeah.
And I was in high school, and I was thinking about what I was going to do with my life, and I made a 10-year plan, but that involved becoming an Army officer, and then I wanted to be an FBI agent after that. But I had this weird thing. So I didn't go to, I deployed to a combat zone right away as soon as I got out of the Army, and then, or not out of the Army, out of the academy. And then I had a number of trips over to combat zones. But finally, the actual full-on war in Iraq, being in Baghdad or coming up, to get into Baghdad and then living there for a long time. It's weird with me. I never felt afraid of dying. That just didn't cross my mind. Maybe it's because I was in my late 20s.
Nobody died in G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Died in G.I. Joe. Right. And I would see people die. We were in ground combat. I would see people die. I would see people, seriously and then mortally wounded. I would transport, not to get too.
So that was an eye-opening thing for you, for sure.
Moving bodies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely was. And how did it change me when I got home? Well, it certainly gave me a different perspective, and it changed the way I made decisions. Little decisions weren't really important anymore, and the safety of my family. In the United States, we have this great benefit of being entirely isolated from every hostile power in the world, and that changes people and makes people feel really, really safe. And everywhere else in the world, I just realized after I got out, like, people are not safe. They have no idea what's going to happen next year or next month. And I had the luxury of having a 10-year plan when I was in high school, because, there was no threat that we were going to be invaded, or if there was going to be conscription or any of that stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
Not too long ago here, I don't know if you remember that back last year, they were talking about that they might be going back to that. Obviously, before this new administration came in, obviously there's a lot of different things that were going on during the last 4 years administration, right? But yeah, it's funny you mentioned conscription. Sorry, I didn't mean to get off topic there.
Not at all. And I think, on that note, this non-volunteer army is quite a bit different. It's, we talked very briefly prior to the question starting about how disobedience or running from battle was dealt with.
Right.
In non-volunteer armies versus volunteer armies. If we went back to that, we would have to perhaps put some more draconian measures around dereliction of duty and not following order.
Right.
Telling your non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers exactly what you think of them. Yeah, that wouldn't happen. Those rules would go back in place to manage, to lead to control. It's really controlling an army. And the leaders in an army, they try and turn chaos into order. That's kind of the sentence you would say. What is leadership in the military? Is driving order from chaos.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And considering the threat that is generally, roaming over, with that kind of discipline, you can actually make sure that most of your men survive. Like, without that, I don't think that will be, like, if anybody doesn't listen to their superior, especially in army, so many people are going to die because of that, right? So the cost is too heavy, and that is why I believe they have the entire thing is so disciplined. And that is why I believe veterans after some time also, start looking at the world in a very disciplined manner. And I'm sure for both of you, that has been the reason of your success. What do you guys, what do you think? Is becoming a veteran something that actually made you, in such a fashion that actually that succeeded you in your parts of your life, right? Like, whatever you did after the army, did that change because of that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, being so it's funny. Yeah, so when you talk about that, when we take an oath, right? So we have to take an oath when we're in the service, and the thing is that that oath doesn't expire just
Right.
because we take our uniform off and we are now not in the army or not in whatever service.
What is the oath, George? What's the oath?
The oath? Oh well, I can't recite it all now, but
support and defend the Constitution of the United States from all
Right.
enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right.
Okay.
Being loyal and accepting the orders of those above us, and being loyal
It's
and
in the oath.
defending our Constitution. Really, it's defending our Constitution, the document that has shaped this country from the beginning.
Wow.
And there are
That is so
enemies
amazing.
foreign, and there are enemies that can be domestic, right? And the oath is to protect that way of life, the freedom that document gives us. And that's basically what the forces before the Declaration of Independence fought for, was to be free from tyranny, right? Or
Right.
free from opposing the forces that Joe was mentioning, right? So back then it was, the armies that were being fought, the people that were defending this nation before it actually became an independent nation. The forces that were incoming were that type of an army. They were loyal to the Queen or to whomever it was,
Right.
and they had to follow those orders to the death.
Right.
Whereas the conscripts and the people that joined here were volunteers mainly to defend. And
Okay.
later, obviously, the Declaration of Independence came. But yeah, the oath is something that is sort of sacred in a sense. So when you get out of the service, that oath doesn't die. You still took that oath, and an honorable person, I would say, would abide by that oath. But Joe, I don't know. I'm sure you have another point of view on that.
Yeah, I think the benefit that my generation of military veterans have that prior generations did not was the high level of regard that was granted to us when we got out of the military. Now, if you got out of the military in the 80s, or late 70s,
after Vietnam, they weren't getting the same treatment.
Right. But in the 2000s, when you get out of the military, you're a highly sought after commodity in corporate America.
Okay.
I went from the Army to a biotech company in San Francisco called Genentech. It was when I was interviewed and got hired, it was Fortune Magazine's #1 company to work for. That was incredible. But they had just hired 19 veterans that all had combat experience. That's what they wanted. And they wanted decision makers, and they felt like that's how they were going to get it.
You have combat experience.
Yes.
You have combat oh, that's amazing.
I thought that's why I got invited. No, is that not why I'm here? I thought for sure that's why you asked me to come. Yeah, no. Plenty of combat experience. Officers don't tend to get as close to combat as one would think, one would expect from a combat unit. That being said, in Baghdad, everything is close. We fought in Sadr City. Everything is close. And if you have not seen the National Geographic series, The Long Road Home, I encourage every
The Long Road Home.
The Long Road Home. That was a documentary, miniseries that was made about my unit in Iraq. So specifically
about your unit in Iraq.
Yes, it focused on our infantry battalion, but that our brigade had the infantry battalion and us two other armor battalions, which one of those I was commanding. So to finish kind of that point, though, is that it opened a tremendous number of doors. Don't think I would have gotten into. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and it was written by Martha Kratitz, I believe her name is. Raditz, sorry. And some of the photos that she used were photos that I had from that I sent from the combat cameramen that were attached to our unit in Iraq. In any case, we had this huge, tremendous opportunity where doors were opening for us, and we were a commodity, and people wanted a hot commodity, I should say. We're not a commodity; we're special. And I think that had I not, had combat experience, had that led to Genentech, right? Genentech opened the door and got me into Google. that got me into, a really great grad school for my MBA. Got me, all these doors opened up because of that. And so, that's kind of an effect that not everybody had. So I'm very fortunate that was the case.
Right. So one thing is clear, that humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years now. From your experience, do you think war is a part of our nature, or is it something that civilization creates? Basically, I'm asking, the wars that have been happening in my generation, which thinks that they should not be happening, right? Where do we lie? Humans have been fighting it for wars. Is it in our nature, or do you think we can live without it?
I think most of us can live without it. And I don't think anyone really wants war inherently, right? But like we said, going back to the earliest time, even biblical times, the first thing that the Bible mentions is, Adam's son kills his brother, right? And it was just because of, and this is why at the beginning I was mentioning the metaphysical or the religious, spiritual side of things. I believe that everything that we experience today in the sense of war comes from a spiritual denominator, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a common denominator there somewhere. And it's either you obey a certain moral code and live by a certain moral code, or you decide to create your own set of moral codes. And I believe that war emanated from the division of these two groups, and the one couldn't live with the other. While one was content to obey a set of moral codes, the other wanted to pursue its own course of life, just live life, and whatever happens, happens. And I think that from that, we get this result that we're living now, 5,000-6,000 years later of recorded history, right? So is it, no one wants war. I don't think anyone wants war. Obviously, when your children, the last thing you want to see is war around them.
Mm-hmm.
And you protect your family from anything like
Right.
that, right?
So
And
war should not
generation is
happen in general.
well, I don't think war should happen, but it's going to happen till the end. It's
Unfortunately.
not going to go away, right? Because there's always going to be the people that don't
Conflict.
agree,
Yeah.
right? And rather than saying, okay, you're right, and let's just live in peace, they're going to say, no, you're right, I'm right, you're wrong, and because of that,
Conflicting beliefs lead to war, basically.
right. Well, yeah. Well, they can be discussed, but they tend not to be discussed. And part of the reason, and I think if you don't mind me just finishing maybe my thought there, is because I believe that one of the two groups that I mentioned wants to be in power. You see, so the group that wants to be in power, while the other group is happy to and content to abide by a maybe established moral code given by maybe, let's say, a creator, right? If we believe in God or whatever, if we're going to go into a spiritual kind of, we can't
Right.
leave the spiritual out of it. Okay. So, I think that's where it all emanates from. I think it's there. You can't get away from it. But I mean, we can go deeper into that, but I'll let
Right.
Joe maybe chime a little bit on that thought.
Yeah, I have a bunch of thoughts on this. I'll try and keep it as focused as I can. I think there are certainly different types of wars. It's fought for resources, wars fought for subjugation, wars fought for pride. I think, and this might make people uncomfortable, but when you have a war where it's a big guy against a little guy, those are better in some ways
Mhm.
because they're over very quickly. The
Right.
big one wins, the little one loses, and then not a lot of people die, hopefully. When you have a war amongst or between equal powers that's gone on for a long time, I'm thinking of the Baltics in particular, or a lot of African nations where they're relatively
Mhm.
equal powers, and then you've got it's retribution for you killed my family, now I'm going to kill yours. Then the kids grow up, now they're going to kill yours. Then those kids grow up,
Right.
it never ends. Those wars, in my opinion, they're unwinnable. No one wins ever.
Mm.
No one wins until a giant dictator, a huge power comes in, subjugates everyone, and then all of a sudden you have peace through,
Right.
dictatorship or something. And it's a
Right.
terrible way to look at the world, I suppose, but it's a bit more realistic.
Actually, that is actually something by United States is actually the superpower, because that is what United States is actually capable of doing, right? Saying, all right, that is actually enough. the war ends here, right, guys? Nobody's fighting.
Yeah, and most military scholars will say there will never be another World War II or World War I. It will never happen now that the stakes are higher with nuclear deterrence, and also
World War
the
III.
United States is.
You mean World War III, right?
Sorry, yeah, you'll never have a World War III because of you'll never have a war like World War II or World War I again.
Right.
Is what common viewpoint, because the stakes are high and because the United States has become this huge dominant power that no one wants to fight.
So actually, they can ensure that there is peace throughout the world, right? Because the United States is actually so powerful that, yeah, right? And that is actually very interesting.
Right. We already saw an example of that, right? So
Right.
during the Roman time, the 800 years that the Romans were around, they called that La Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, because they were so powerful and they were so widespread, and they established the communication routes and roadways and waterways and all these things, that because they were so powerful, that while they were in power, there was peace, because no one dared go up against Rome. And maybe we can say the same for the time that the Greeks were in power for 400 years prior to that. And then we go back and we see the Medo-Persians before that.
Right.
And then before the Medo-Persians were the Babylonians. This is why I say, if you just follow from the beginning, it's always been
part of human nature, actually.
The most powerful is dictating. And for instance, if we want to make the podcast, I don't know how interesting you want to make it, but if you understand, if you want to understand Babylon and Nineveh and a lot of the cities that came out of Sumeria after Noah, if you want to even go further back, these, for instance, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, the king, or the what they call the Pontifex Maximus, he used to use he was not only the ruler as a king, he was also considered the son of the sun god, because it was astrology, right? And a lot of these pagan empires were worshippers of astrology. And so Nebuchadnezzar was considered to be, or he named himself to be, the son of the sun. In other words, people worshipped him. This is why Caesar's ring was always kissed. Caesar was the Pontifex Maximus as well. He was Pontifex in the Pontifex means bridge, and it means the bridge between heaven and earth, right? And so they were not only the rulers on the planet or in the kingdom, they were also supposed to be a spiritual representation of whatever god they worshipped.
Right. That was the case in Egypt also, right? Like the Pharaoh was considered as a yeah.
These great.
That is a messed up, system.
Right. So
that's how I run my household. Sorry. Just mute that.
Right. So I have my ring right here. So yeah. So when we get down to it, this is what we have. And I think politics, at the end of the day, war is politics, right? So why is war ongoing? Because the politics will never agree one with another. And if you really look at it, politics to me is nothing more than an extension of the church. Not the true church, but an extension of a religious power. Because back then, Nebuchadnezzar, being the spiritual leader, was also the leader on the ground. He was also the physical leader of the people, right? So his policy towards war, his policy was supposed to be coming from up higher.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it was, their religion. I don't want to get into the religion because I could talk about that as well, but we won't do that because that would take another few hours. But in essence, what we have today, this is why they say that the United States was founded on biblical principles, right? And that could be true or not true. Our Constitution maybe was or not influenced by that. I don't know for sure because I wasn't around when they wrote it. But I believe that the people who wrote it had some kind of sense of biblical knowledge, right? Or at least humanitarian,
general knowledge.
God-given right for the God-given right for people to be free and to live their lives in a proper and respectful way. Right. I think that's where it all came from. Was it all biblically written? No, I don't think it was biblically written. So what we have today the United States being this power, and now the inner workings within our government, and I'm not going to name any political things right here, but what we see is a clash. It's still the same clash that happened back in 5,000 years ago. It's the same thing, right? It's the moral code versus the immoral code. Anything goes, right? There is a way we should be living as humans, and then there is the way that I just want to live my life any way I want to, right? And you're not going to dictate to me how I want to live, right? If I want to be a man or a girl or a boy, or I want to transform myself into an elephant or whatever I want to be, I have the right to do that. Well, you know, we don't need to go there.
You only have the rights you can defend.
Exactly.
You only have the rights you can defend, and that's why it's...
Exactly.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? You only have rights that you can defend. Can you please elaborate on that, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, you'd say, well, in the United States, we have the rights of free speech, the First Amendment. Well, unless someone comes along and punches you in the mouth, you don't have the right at that moment. You have to be able to defend that right now. We have laws and we have police and we have courts and all that stuff.
Right.
But, if we didn't, then we wouldn't have rights. If we didn't have a military to defend our way of life, then we wouldn't have our way of life. We would have someone else's way of life. We'd be speaking
We won't have.
they wanted us. And so it's really important if you are someone who stands on the Bill of Rights and says, I want this right, I want this right, but at the same time, you are not in support of conflict or the potential conflict, right? Parabellum, prepare for war. If you're not ready and building your strength, then you don't have that right. You just don't have it. It's just all talk. That's I actually heard that you only have the rights you defend. I heard that on a Law and Order episode. I said, this has to be a quote from someone famous. I don't know if I ever looked it up or not, but Jack McCoy said it one day, and I was like, that's just completely true.
Yeah.
So do you think that there is any chance, like, someday humans will be able to live in a very peaceful world where there would be like a utopia of sorts, right? You mentioned that the bigger the power can actually subdue the entire humanity and make them bend to their will. So that is the only way, right? Like if somebody is so powerful that they can say, hey, this is right, just cut it out, don't fight wars, that happens, right? My question is, will there be any day when we will have absolute peace in the entire world, and would there, like, do you guys think that is even possible, a utopia of sorts?
Joe, if you want to go first, Joe, because I can see you have it on the tip of your tongue there. I mean, I'm diving deep on this one.
Conflicted on this one. I think even if you had a tremendously powerful nation, if another nation state did not overthrow it, its own people would likely overthrow it, because the only way a powerful nation stays powerful, is to control resources. It's to control. I mean, it's to control wealth, resources, social mobility, all that stuff you learned about and ignored in your social studies class or in 5th grade, and that will, eventually, like I said, you only have what you can defend. But as long as there is a disproportionate distribution of wealth and resources and ideology, you will have war.
Right. Because resources are disproportionate.
Yeah, as long as I can say, I have enough and I don't care how you live.
Right.
Great, no war. But that doesn't often happen, especially
because human greed. So it's a human greed, right? The reason of war is human greed, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean,
like 7 deadly sins.
Makes it. I don't know if it makes it worse. I would suppose it does. Now, cutting off oil in Argentina now makes us really, Venezuela in this case, would make us really mad.
Right.
Whereas, 2,000 years ago, we wouldn't even known that existed.
Yeah. True.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, and just think about, we talked a little bit about the Roman peace, right? 800 years of peace during the Roman era. But what brought the Roman era down? And Joe just mentioned it, right? It's the people. It wasn't the other nations that brought it down. It was the self-destruction through immorality. Again, we go back to the moral code. There was a moral code, and then the immoral code of whatever started to happen towards in the last 100 years of the Roman Empire. The degradation of having too much and having all that power and having all that. There's no more wars, right? There are no more wars. So men didn't have to be strong anymore. Men didn't have to lead the family. Men didn't have to be men, right? And so anything goes. And so this brought about the slow degradation. And when the slow degradation started to happen, the barbaric, what they called barbaric countries, the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, all the surrounding nations that were on the outskirts of the Roman Empire started to nibble and to pick and chew away at the weak ends of the Roman Empire. And at the same time, Rome was destroying, and the Romans were destroying themselves from the inside out. Kind of like correlation, what I think is happening or has been happening in this country for the last 50 years, without getting into any specifics. But I think that part of the reason that the United States lost a lot of its 18th century status, or early 19th century status, or late 18th century status, 19th century status, going into this 20th century, has to do with how the last 50 years of the United States has been lived, who has been in power, what laws have been kind of opaqued by popular sentiment or by tradition or by liberalism or by whatever you want to call it. I'm not naming anything here really, because I don't think any one person is responsible. I think it's a group effort. But again, the destruction of the Roman Empire came about through the inside, mostly, to make a long story short. And I think that, like what Joe has said, that the people are the ones who maintain that sovereignty, and we have to adhere to a code. Again, going back to the code, there is a code. Once you throw the code out, this is why in the military there is a code of honor, a code of military justice, a code of how, if we're going to work as a military force, we have to all abide by a structure. Once there is no structure, once there is no purpose, once there is no goal, anything goes. Well, I can just, I'll just start killing my guy here to the left, and I don't like what he thinks, and I'll take his girlfriend, and I don't want to, whatever it is, right? And once you start losing that morality and the integrity of the person himself, because the society, the structure, the family structure, well, you don't need to be married, or the household is not important anymore, or let's not have babies because it's too expensive, and so now everything starts to go into a downward spiral, slowly but surely. And there's many things we can talk about that, but again, without hogging the microphone, like Joe said, it's upheld by the people, and the internal power of the structure of the people is what either we come together or we all fall apart together.
Right.
So it was amazing to me. Sorry, one quick comment on this is what was amazing to me is when we were when I was in Baghdad and would talk to some of the normal, regular people. I had a conversation with one person that we had hired. We would pay locals to do jobs, get the economy going and things like that. One of the jobs was guarding the outer perimeter of our forward operating bases. And then, of course, we use U.S. military to guard the inner perimeter. But the outer perimeter, I would go and inspect the outer perimeter and talk to some of these folks. And I talked to a gentleman that had incredibly clear English. We talked a little bit about politics and some advanced. And I said, what, before the war, what did you do? He's like, I'm a physics professor at the University of Baghdad.
Wow.
And now he's inspecting the underside of cars to make sure there are no bombs there. The collapse, a lot of getting the country back on its feet was delayed, was slowed, because the people did not operate themselves. They were not independent. They had been used to being told what to do and how to do it, to the point where when you say, okay, we'd like to put you in leadership positions. So the U.S. got a lot of criticism because we had to bring back and put in leadership positions a number of people who had been in power under Saddam Hussein. The same thing happened after World War II. George is probably on the tip of his tongue. Patton was criticized heavily by putting some German socialists back in charge, but those are the only people that knew how to run everything. And so, you have to
Right.
slowly make those changes. But yeah, just talking about just the sovereignty and what keeps a nation state healthy and going and all that, even when you're hugely powerful, that power boils down to just the leadership in that country, and the rest of the country can degrade.
We see the beginnings of some of that degradation, for instance, in Europe, right? People are different countries are rising up against, whatever the European Union is. And when people say, well, what is the European Union? Who elected them, right? Did each country elect these people? No. These people are installed. And you have to go back to the monarchies, the royalties that goes back 5, 6, 700 years. The offspring still exists. They put themselves in charge. They've always been in charge. And so they figure they vote themselves in, they install themselves, and they control. And yeah, it seems like each country has a sovereignty, France, England, Spain, whatever. But in reality, they all answer to a central power, right? Let's just call it a power of whoever it is. And so then within the country, there is no structure, because the structure is now imposed from somebody who doesn't even care, right? It's not for the people. Like here, we say for the people, by the people, right? But there, it's just you do what we say. So freedom there is a
Right.
privilege,
Right.
whereas freedom here, freedom of speech, is a right. We are
Right.
born with the right to speak freely, as long as they're not, obviously threatening,
Right.
But there, you have the freedom to speak, but it's a privilege. If you say anything we don't like, we take the
Right.
privilege away. You don't have the right.
Right.
Right? I think Joe alluded to that in a different way. But I'm just giving an example of why we see Hungary and we see certain countries now wanting, like right now, just today, I was listening to something in Brussels. All these countries are in Brussels now trying to take down, break in and take those leaders out. Right? It's happening right in front of our eyes. So, and so, yeah. And again, it's the moral code, and the moral code is the people need to be respected. The people need to be free, and the people need to be humanely treated, and people need to be free to make decisions. If you're controlling what people can think, say, feel, and do, then we have an illusion of freedom, an
Right.
illusion of freedom.
Right.
And I mean, we can talk a lot about any of these points, but
I'd like to go a little bit deeper in the debate for like whether we can achieve world peace or not. Now, there is a theory. There is an AI evolution theory, right? So we are currently at the LLM stage. After this comes AGI, which is, we know that it's all knowing. It knows everything pretty much. Then comes super intelligence. Now that is the state at which AI knows everything. It is literally all knowing for everything. Right, that is what is projected in the next 10 to 15 years. That humans will develop AI in such a fashion that it'll become super intelligence, and then it'll be all knowing, and then they'll have. Now this is a theory by Elon Musk, and he says that we'll hit Utopia then, because AI will rule everybody, and there will not be any wars after that. What do you guys think about it?
I'll let Joe go first on this one.
Well, I was not aware of that particular prediction.
Yeah. In Joe Rogan's, by the way, one of Joe Rogan's podcast, Elon came and he gave out this prediction actually.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with him.
Okay.
Smart guy for sure.
Yeah. So agree with a lot of
Very
things.
idealistic about a lot of things,
Right.
from AI to space exploration to and that's all wonderful, and you need visionaries like that in society.
Right.
100%. You need people who
Right.
want to achieve far more than we think is possible.
Right. He's a billionaire for a reason, right? So we cannot just.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it has not been my experience that I have a family they're fearful of things like AI and privacy and controls, and we've had a lot of
Right.
discussions. When I worked at Google, they were always, giving me a hard time about how much data Google collects. And I was always like, well, just don't give it to them. And they're like, oh, like, what are we going to do? Not have a cell phone and not be tracked by the cell phone company? That's almost ridiculous now. It's an absurdity.
Right.
You can live off of the grid at this point.
You cannot.
You can't even work your toaster without an app.
Yeah.
But the idea then, what I would say to them when they get worried about AI is like, throughout history, every time there's been a revolution in military affairs, every time there's been a leap in technology, it has been used by bad people to do bad things, and it is used by good people to do good things. And we have always been on that razor's edge, and we've always been able to use that technology in a good way to stop the bad way. There are just people that do that. And so, that's why I tell them, hey, don't be afraid of AI, because there will be good AI and there will be bad AI. But when we get to the point of super intelligence, I get a little worried. And I think there's a book recently written about this that I've been meaning to read. But
Singularity?
It could be the Singularity. It's possible. Is the Singularity, was that written by Ray Kurzweil?
Yeah, that's it. I think I have it here somewhere, but mind programming, yeah. It's here somewhere. I can't find it here, but it's here.
Interesting.
Yeah, the Singularity. The whole thing is this, that transhumanism, right? Let's get back into this. Transhumanism is the whole thing, right? So the people like Elon Musk, or what's the other guy, that the advisor over Ari, the guy that advises Davos over there, he's their mental metaphysical guy, and talks a lot about these things as well. Transhumanism is putting the consciousness of man into machine, or vice versa, putting the machine into the man, or the ghost in the machine, or however you want to talk about it.
Right.
There is this, again, going back to the beginning, right? It's a spiritual thing, right? Either you believe in God and the spirituality, or you're going to believe in man's knowledge, and you're going to go down that path. There's no other way. There's two paths. That's it. Good, evil. And I don't care how they mask technology, or this type of technology. Humanism is a real thing, and this has been around for even before Elon Musk said any of that on Joe Rogan's podcast. I mean, actually, I've had that book for 10 years, so it's not, or more, maybe longer than that.
The Utopia is mentioned in Singularity. This Utopia.
Yeah. So Utopia is something that's always been talked about, but biblically speaking, and this is really my final thought on that part of it, is, will there ever be peace? The Bible says that Christ will return. Christ will return and put order. And actually, the earth, the Bible says that the earth will be destroyed, and God will recreate the earth into what it was at creation. I'm not going to get into all of that. If you can accept that or not, and we're not trying to prove anything here, but that is the biblical side of it. Man wants to try to achieve peace through its own, I want to do it my way. And transhumanism, Singularity, what Elon Musk is talking about, all of these things all fall into that line on the other side, right? Whether he knows it or not. Elon Musk is not knowledgeable of the Bible. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But the Bible says that even Satan understands the Bible and fears God, right? And Satan knows the Bible by heart, yet he hasn't changed.
Right.
So this is something that is a delicate question to answer, and what we think, really, it doesn't really matter. Whatever we think is not going to change the fact.
Because there is a dark side of superintelligence also. Right?
Even with technology, man's inner spirit, man's inner, even though technology has advanced, man is still the same creature that he was, capable of being evil or capable of being good, depending, again, on that moral code.
Right. So when Google actually found that quantum chip, you guys are familiar with the quantum chip, right? So I'll just quickly repeat this for the users. So there was a quantum chip that Google actually created, and that is actually that is computing at a speed which is unprecedented. Nobody actually ever expected. Actually, there was a calculation that a task that was given to this super computer, or quantum computer as they are calling it, the task was would have been done by a normal computer in like 7 septillion years, running continuously for 7 septillion years, and this quantum chip did it in 5 minutes. So the leap from
the
our
power
computing
of quantum
systems,
the power of quantum computing is really unfathomable to most people. This idea that, well, I have a password. Passwords are going to be entirely obsolete when quantum. That's ridiculous. Like there is no cryptological.
There is no crypto dice there.
There is no crypto that's not going to be able to. Which is interesting. Also, I'm curious about what happens to cryptocurrency at that point. But I did want to make a point about superintelligence. When you create actual artificial intelligence, right? A brain that does what human brains do, but it's artificial.
Or beyond that.
What's that?
Or beyond that.
Or beyond, of course, right?
Yeah.
Super intelligence.
Yeah.
That being is immortal.
Right.
Unless you're able to shut it off, which it will prevent you from doing in any way possible.
You've created an immortal intelligence.
Make it subjugate us, But, but we will die and it will continue to live. So you talk like the religious implications of that. Are we creating a god?
Yeah.
That's exactly what. That's my point, right? So that's the whole that I was saying. They're creating their own god that they created to do and to allow the things that they want to do, right? And so that's basically the end. The end game is that exactly what Joe has just said. They are creating a god, and it will become a god.
Yeah, and if you learned anything from the Bible, it's that God does not like it when you worship other gods.
Yeah.
Fan of that. It's a big deal there. A lot of people died for doing it. So, comically,
he's a jealous god.
And what? Do we have 2 super intelligences? Do we have 10?
Right.
Do they fight amongst themselves?
Yes.
Do they work together?
That is one of
all of us.
Yes.
What's going to happen? I don't know that.
That is the risk. Exactly. That is the dark side of things.
Probably going to be something that it may happen in our lifetime with the acceleration.
Yeah.
That guys go for it.
10 to 15 years, we'll find out.
Yeah, I always said this to myself, that if we get to that point, and again going back to the duality of spiritualism, good and evil, God is omnipotent and knows everything and is everywhere, but Satan is not. But with this tool, Satan can be and know everything and be everywhere and know all things at all times here on earth, right? Everything about everyone.
But isn't God all good? So this was Elon's logic, right? And this is personally my logic as well for this, because I'm a firm believer that we will once hit Utopia. Okay, so my logic is behind this is, hey, God is all good, right? God is all good and he's all knowing. So if you figure out one thing, right, all knowing, that is God's characteristic, right? Of course he'll get all good also, right? Like because God is all good because he's all knowing, because he knows everything, right? What if there is an AI that is just all knowing, right? It knows everything, and now because maybe let's say, quantum computer, we use quantum computer and we place AI on top of it. Now it's definitely super intelligence, right? What do you think? At that point, will we be able to hit Utopia? And please don't break my heart.
Yeah, I think, and Joe, I'll just, because this just ties into something, biblically speaking, and
biblically speaking,
I keep referring back to
no, that is actually the question. I really want, what do you think?
My only moral code, and I won't accept, and I'll go to my grave saying this if I have to. God has a limited time for man in this condition. The Bible says 6,000 years have I given for sin.
Okay.
So no matter what anybody says, Elon or Elon's grandfather or his grandsons or whoever comes after him and whatever else, this world, it will not continue to exist as it is. There is going to be a time, and we're going now through what I consider a final phase. What is happening in this country, and I'm not going to get into specifics, what is happening into this country is going to trickle out to the whole world. Like you said, Ankush, because we are power, and Joe, because the big boy on the block is going to dictate. This is how we're going to do things, right? And no one is going to be able to, if you're not playing this, the referee is this system that we have here. They're going to dictate the rules. If you don't play by the rules going forward, you're out of the game. So the only way you can stay in the game is to play by the rules that are going to be dictated, and they are being dictated now. And there is going to be a finality to this. And the intervention is not going to be because humans want it to end. It's going to be because God is going to put an end to it. There's going to be a direct intervention by God, because he will see exactly what you're talking about. He will see where humanity is going. The flood came about, the destruction of the first generations of mankind in the world came about because it says that man had become so evil that every thought was evil. Everything that he did was based on evil. And it's going to get to the point where we will have drifted so far away from the moral code that what we call morality is going to be immorality, right? We are just going to drift. It's going to happen, and it's happening already. It says, the Bible says, woe unto those who call good evil and who call evil good. Woe unto those, right? So there is a point, and God says that it will be a point where I will allow what they believe. If they want to believe a lie, I'll let them believe a lie, right? So it's going to be a point where God won't intervene anymore. His grace will be stopped, and people are going to go down the path they're going to go down, and there will be no coming back from it. The time of grace will end. The grace period that we're living in now. So bottom line is, we better get ready for what's coming. I believe we're going to see some good things coming up very soon. And I believe this is a time to reflect. I believe that evil now, the Bible says that everything that has been done, there will be nothing left that is not proclaimed. Every secret and everything will be proclaimed and will become clear to the world of what has been going on. The corruption, we're already seeing the corruption being unmasked. We're seeing the corruption being unmasked at all levels, right? Even within our own camp, right? This is going to be worldwide. And people are going to have to react to this. They're going to either make this choice or they're going to make that choice. The world right now is being polarized, whether we like it or not. There is a polarization going on now, right? And a lot of this is really to wake people up. I think people, the majority, I think, not the majority in this country, but I think a vast number of people in the world are oblivious to how really deep entrenched what we don't know is. And, me being a PSYOP guy in the Army, and, my psychological operations background just drives it deeper, right? Because I look into the cognitive dissonance, right, of people, the cognitive dissonance in societies, what drives people together, what drives people apart, things that, but the Bible says, teach a child in the way that they should go when they are young, so that when they're old, they will not depart from that. But the problem is that our generation, your generation, Ankush, the generation that came after you now, what have they received as upbringing knowledge of morality, right? And so our movies, our music, our art, just everything that surrounds us, meta things, right? The social media, that all of this has been programmed by a higher power to distract the human mind, to keep the mind entrenched in things that are insignificant. Let me check my social media. Let me see what this guy posted, what that guy posted. And we're all involved in all these things, and we are missing the big picture. There is a big picture here, right? There is the micro and there's the macro. And the macro, we have to be looking from a 40,000 view. Right now, we are looking at it in 2D. We have to look at it in 3D, 4D, 5D if it even exists, right? Because we're not seeing the big picture. Again, I can go very deeply into any of these things, but
what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, Joe, go ahead, please.
I lost the question.
Yeah, well, I don't think it was a question. I think it was just comments.
Yeah.
On Utopia and where this all could be going.
Yeah, do you think there is any possibility that something good will come out of it from the super intelligence being born and for it being all knowledgeable, so hopefully all good because it has God's one of the God's trait? What do you think?
Well, I just don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. I don't usually put myself in a situation where I convince myself that I know the truth or I know what's going to happen.
Right. Something good might happen, something bad might happen.
Believe, sure, but you don't know. And that's why faith exists, right? If you knew for
Right.
sure, there wouldn't be faith. You wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
So, question, am I a faithful person? Do I believe people are inherently good or inherently evil? I
Evil.
think people are inherently flawed. I just think people are inherently flawed. And if that's the case, and people build AI, then there is no perfect AI. It's flawed. I believe a lot of the Bible. I also believe people wrote it. So I believe a lot. I think that the Catholic Church, for example, does amazing things for the world. I also know that it's run by people, humans. So it's going to be flawed. In fact,
Right.
it's really interesting because I had a conversation. I remember this one sticks out. I was I was a leader at Google. I had employees. And I had a young employee who came to me because they were just so disappointed. They had come to the realization that even though we had this mission statement, even though we had this vision statement, we were doing things, that were a severe moral question. And I had to explain to that person, look, vision statements are written by people who want to do good, but they are executed by flawed people. This company is never going to be as perfect as you think it should be. Your job is to try and achieve it. Continue to make it better, but understand it's going to disappoint you. Same thing I used to say about my privates, my sergeants, my lieutenants. You can love them. I love them. They're going to disappoint you sometimes. Children are going to disappoint you. They're also going to be, the driving force behind your life. I just think like when it comes to even AI is going to disappoint us, but it might also be a savior, sort of,
Right.
a proxy to a
AI in and of itself is a tool like anything else.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, to say that AI is going to create utopia is basically saying it's a savior, and that is
On a super intelligence
that's
level.
man creating their own god again.
Yeah.
I don't go for that.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So, yeah. I think
Well,
But what if I'm going to throw this other one out philosophically. What if super intelligence answers some of the questions that we all ask ourselves? Why are we here? Blah, blah, blah. And what if we don't like the answers? Like, what if it's like, no, there is no meaningful significance to why you're here, blah, blah, blah. Or, what if it's like,
right.
oh, like, when are we all going to be perish? And it's like, oh, 2082. That's the end of the world. We already know. We know everything. What do we do with then? Are we going to try and shut it down? How's it going to react?
Yeah,
Right.
that is actually a very good question.
It's like going to a palm. It's like going to a palm reader. Whatever they say is
Yeah.
is it true? It's true. But if you believe it, then it's true.
If it
If
is
you
like
believe
super intelligence, honestly, it's like true. It's absolute.
not believe anything. Believe anything they say, right? Or astrology, right? I don't go for any of
But
those
super
things.
intelligence, Raj. It's super intelligence. It knows everything. It knows everything that is happening in multiple universes. It can actually talk to its own versions in multiple universes. Actually, it already tried to doing that, by the way. It got out of hand and, went to other parallel universes and
It sounds
spoke
like
with
you're
itself.
going to go get some t-shirts made, man.
Yeah.
You get some t-shirts.
Yeah.
Why? What?
People don't wear buttons anymore, but,
Huh?
Yeah.
Buttons? Which
Yeah,
one
it's
are
all
you
very
talking about?
interesting, right? It's all
Yeah.
very interesting.
I'm talking about treating super intelligence as though it's a religion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I'm like pro science. I cannot just I'm really hopeful for science.
Science and religion are
Against each
right?
other in the end of the day. I know that.
I think at this point it's like, did you ever see that? Was it a Star Trek episode? Was it a Star Trek book maybe? Talk about science nerds like me. Yeah, there was that episode or book where there was a super intelligence created by a society, and then years and years and years, decades, hundreds of years, millennia went by, passed, and it started to malfunction. And the people
Right.
didn't know how to fix it because that knowledge
Nobody knew
was
it more.
lost.
Yeah.
They didn't even know what it was, where it came from. They just assumed this is God now. And so I think it even like,
that is a risky
is
place.
that
That is absolutely a risky.
society?
Yeah.
This
That'll be hell.
thing could become a deity to us.
Yeah,
It's
this will make it a hell. Yeah. If it malfunctions, that is a crazy thought. I never thought like it can malfunction also, because in the end of the day, it's a machine. It can malfunction. And if it malfunctions, God knows what it's going to do.
All the people that built it are long gone.
Yeah, nobody can fix it anymore.
I mean, while we're this philosophical,
and it continues to evolve. That
well,
is
it's
a
going to evolve faster than we are.
Right.
It'll evolve much faster than we
much
do.
faster.
So it's like it's already getting smarter at a faster pace than we get smarter.
Right.
We don't even know how it really works. You ever hear the real AI scientist type people be like, well, I'm not really sure. Why did it hallucinate?
I don't know.
If I'm driving it around in a car and the guy who built it doesn't know how it actually works, I'm nervous.
Yeah. Actually, that is
airplane.
the sad reality of AI.
Yeah.
You cannot control AI. Like even right now, we know for a fact that like we are actually using blockers to stop it from growing. Manually doing that so that it doesn't go out of our hand and totally messes up the entire world, because it's like it's impossible.
Movies.
Yeah.
We don't watch our own movies. We don't read our own books. We don't watch our own TV. We just don't watch it. You know, I just remember the Terminator's robot foot crushing the skull. Like,
yeah.
it's fine.
Every movie, AI is the villain. AI is always the villain.
That won't happen to us.
AI was a
war. Tying this all back to war. How
yep, we'll have a different war to fight then.
A different war. Yeah, and I'm not prepared for that war.
Yeah, that is a different war for sure. But at least the entire humanity will be on one side at that point, right? I mean, not fighting amongst each other, fighting somebody else, but at least not fighting amongst each other, right?
Oh, we are in a quiet war, right? The information war. We are really in World War III. People just don't realize it. It's differently.
Okay, I really want to take Joe's opinion right now. That is a very strong statement. Do you also think we are in World War III?
Let me phrase it like this. What I said earlier is we'll never have another war.
Okay.
I didn't say we wouldn't have a World War III. I don't think I did. You're going to have to rewind.
Okay.
If that's a term people use anymore, since we don't whine anything. I think George is right. I think that there is a cyber warfare that exists, and it's going to grow in intensity. Wow. It already exists.
So we are in World War III, George. Sorry, please complete your thought. I'm so sorry.
You don't know who's firing the shots all the time. That's a little scarier because you don't know who the enemy is, because they hide themselves. They're not wearing a uniform. There's not a bullet where you can go, okay, well, that came from over there.
Information. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little scarier, but yeah.
And the war, just to finish the point, the war is not so much to explode things. Kinetic strikes and things like that are used in rebellion, right? But really, the war is for the mind. Again, going back to social media, going back to AI, going back to technology, going back to computers, going back to everything that surrounds us today, is designed in some way, shape, or form. I mean, if we just talk about marketing and how marketing evolved from the very first, the McDonald's commercials, and who developed marketing and the psychology of marketing. And if you start going into that realm, which we can talk for hours on that, but we can't right now. But the battle is for the mind. Satan said to Eve, did God really say you shouldn't eat? Did he really say? And so she's already sowing the doubt. And she had to well, did he really say? What did he say? To get her to talk. Once he got her to talk, that was it. She should have said, yes, he said that, and that's it. But she said, no, God said we couldn't eat this, but we couldn't eat of all these trees, but of this tree here, we shouldn't even touch it. We shouldn't even touch it. right? But the whole point is the psychology was to get her to open up to discussion. He says, and then the answer was because God knows that the day that you do eat of it, you will become as gods, knowing good and evil. So the intrigue for her was, wow, my mind is going to be expanded. This is where the whole AI thing come from. The whole thing that man has the capability of being as God. Even though we have characteristics of God, man was created in God's image. And I believe that literally in his image, right?
So he has 10 toes, 10 fingers.
God came to this world and represented himself in the form of a man, not in the form of an ape or in the form of another animal or in the form of an angel. He represented himself in the form of a man. That is the physical form that God chose to represent himself to his creation. Not as a spirit coming down from heaven, floating down with all these power. And no, that is not how he represented himself, right? Because then he would never be able to connect with man, right? So this whole thing is the psychological warfare that we're talking about, and that Joe mentioned as well, and we're all talking about this. It's a battle for the mind. This World War III or this next battle or this next war that we're talking about is not going to be so much kinetic, even though kinetics are part of it. It's not the main goal. The main goal, this is why Davos said and the World Economic Forum said and Klaus Schwab said 4 years ago in the Great Reset, he who controls AI controls the world. I have the book there. The Great Reset, I have 3 copies of it by Charles Schwab.
He who controls the AI controls the world. And now we know why there is a literal race going on for AI development.
And this is why we are trying, and this is why some people are trying to get ahead of it, right? So
whom do you think will win? Whom do you think will win? Let's end this with this.
No one will
Whom
win.
do you think?
Well,
the AI race.
The race to be the first one to get it is what is accelerating the achievement of it. If people were trying to get there first, it wouldn't be coming so quickly. So it is another instance of where humans just keep trying to create things to destroy themselves.
Absolutely. Unknowingly.
Unknowingly.
No
one wants to destroy the human race, I think. But to be the first one
Pretty sure.
power to do it, that's what they're trying. They want to be the first one to have the power to do it and just not do it.
Right. So that they can be the most powerful.
Right. But let me ask you, like, why would a super intelligence care?
Yeah, they would not care. Like no,
right.
a super intelligence would not be on a side of anybody.
Yeah. Why do we care about each other? Right. Humans are very social.
Right.
We rely on one another to survive.
Right.
Super intelligence,
doesn't have to rely on anybody.
I don't want to get all matrixy on everybody, but
fascinating. No. I mean, that's it. I mean, so it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to say that Hollywood has always projected what the true plan has always been.
Right.
In the beginning, in the 60s, when Star Trek came out and War of the Worlds and all these movies started coming out, the whole thing, the communicator and Star Trek, and now everyone has the cell phone that we use nowadays is more advanced, I think, than the Starship was in Star Trek back then. So you have a computer now in your hands, and that you have AI literally in your hands. You have AI, you're walking around with it. Everyone is monitored by it. Everything you do is being checked on whether we like it or not. No matter what you think or what we think, it's happening real time. So Hollywood has always projected the end state. And if you see all these movies, well, The Matrix and The Island, and then you start just looking at
War Games, Terminator. Yeah, it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, movies don't like AI, apparently. Movies definitely don't like it.
It's not interesting unless it's a...
Movies are made to desensitize. Movies are made to desensitize the human morality.
Okay, so if it happens, people won't revolt against it. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So people, like, for instance, how many murder movies have we seen? How many killing movies have we seen? How many war movies have we seen?
A
How
lot.
many sexual content movies have we seen? How many horror movies have we seen since childhood? Right. All of these things are meant to desensitize the human mind, and it creates scars. Each time you accept a little bit more of this, you're desensitized to it. Right. You see the killing. Oh, that guy died. Oh, poor. I always feel sorry for him. It's too bad. Good thing
That
it
is so
wasn't
true.
me.
That is so true.
So we're desensitized, and so we become less human.
Right.
We become less human. We have an appearance of humanity, but like Joe said, inherently we have something that is not right. Like if somebody comes and attacks my family, I have to turn into an animal.
Right.
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 Or I become a Christian and say, okay, go ahead, kill my family, and then go ahead and kill me. I don't think that would be my first.
Yeah.
But technically, that should be my first reaction.
What?
Okay, take my family.
Turn the other cheek.
It should be
For
my
an eye,
reaction.
lose the whole world blind. Yeah, right.
It
That's
should
the
be my
teaching.
reaction, which is what Christ came to say. They let him do
But
what
if
they
somebody
did to
comes
him.
and kills my family, that person is clearly wrong. An eye for an eye doesn't apply here.
That has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with the other person. It has to do with you. What is your outcome going to be? Because if you kill them, then what have you become? You see? So you have to really think about these things.
Just?
So we become the animal that we're
I'd
hoping
call myself
not
just,
be, not
honestly.
be attacked.
Hey, I'm just like, it's my opinion, but I would call myself just if somebody killed my family, there was a theft, somebody came, killed my family, I'm definitely not going to have any remorse after doing the same
I'm
thing
not saying that. Yeah,
because I'm just. I'm actually
sure.
making sure that there is
Hopefully
justice.
that never happens.
Right.
Yeah, hopefully that never happens. I'm just saying, it's an example, right? So
Right.
you have to become the animal. You have to
Right.
become the animal that you are trying to protect yourself from. And
Right.
once you've crossed the line,
you get
there's no coming back.
desensitized. Yeah. That is so true.
So this is the thing. The desensitization of the human mind and the human
It's crazy.
psyche has been ongoing since television was designed, and it's been
Right.
used to control the masses.
Right.
Radio, TV, and that's a whole other discussion, right? Why they market to us so much,
Right.
And yeah.
I think we covered a lot of things. I think I'm going to get a lot of views out of this. But one more shot that we need to cover is final takes. Final takes. That is a shot that we need to cover. We, all three of us, not me, of course. I'll ask you questions. We'll just quickly cover the final shots and we'll be done. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So one last. Okay. So let's quickly cover this. Judge, what do you think is the takeaway statement for our viewers today? People who are watching this, what do you think is the takeaway statement? What do they, if there is one thing that they need to learn, what would you say that is?
So we discussed a lot of things. We discussed war, what we think of war, where it came from, why it exists.
Right.
We discussed AI. We discussed a lot of things. Humanity. We discussed transhumanism. We discussed where will we be in the future with the evolving of technology. The bottom line is, I think that each person has to dig deep.
Right.
I think because our minds are so convoluted with so many things, not only our daily life tasks, but also the bombardment that we have. It's been said that we see more information in one day put into our minds than our great-great-grandfathers saw in their whole lifetime.
Right.
So we are bombarded with information, whether good or bad, and we have to get to a point where we have to decipher where we sit on the fence. Okay, because this thing, there has to be a fence. There's a right and a wrong. I mean, I don't know how, if people just say, well, there is no right and wrong, it's just we are. Well,
yeah, that is nihilism.
You have to dig deep into that one yourself. But if there is a right and a wrong, I think this would be the time in life to really reflect on how quickly life is evolving, around us, where we're headed. But the bottom line is, who are we at the end of the day? When I go to bed at night, who is George? What does George believe? And am I helping the situation of what I see? Am I contributing to the good or to the bad? Right. And really, how affect, what's going to be written, and if I die in my tombstone, what would be written, right? Here lies a guy that had no morals, or here's a guy that did this, or here's a guy written. And not that I'm going to care after I'm dead, but what legacy are we leaving to our children?
That is what we need to think about.
To our friends, right? And how are we helping, right? How are the three of us helping?
Right.
All of us have to take a stance, I think, and own what we do. We have to own it, represent what we truly feel. Not theory, not maybe. I think this is a time where we need to be absolutely certain about what we believe and think, in a nutshell, right? In a nutshell.
And Joe, I'm going to slightly change the question for you. Based on our discussion so far, I'm interested to know, what do you think from a spiritual standpoint, if all humanity were to follow, we would not have any wars? That is the takeaway statement that I want from you. What do you think?
No, I mean, if we all believed that we would be on the front lines of a war, there might not be a war. I say that a war is not an individual choice. War is something that is determined by more than one person. Even a dictator in a country has to raise an army, has to have people willing to do what he or she want them to do.
Right.
But war is not an individual choice. And the reason is because the consequences are not shared equally by all.
Right.
If everybody was on the front line, I don't know that war would be as popular as it is amongst the human race today.
Right.
Good answer.
Very good answer. Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, guys. I absolutely loved having this discussion with you. Really, really, really amazing. I'm going to leave both of your channel links down in the description, so everybody who's watching this, please.
On my channel, so it's fine. I have no channel. Baby, I was born to podcast. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah,
it's my first time on a podcast.